Let's get started. It's Campfire Football and SGFC, and we're going to talk Chelsea, but we're also going to talk, well, brilliant current events in football. And Greg, why don't we just start with the VAR from this past weekend, because that's just the top of
It's the hot
everyone's
topic.
minds. It is. It is.
Indeed, yeah.
So, for everybody, if maybe you don't watch Premier League football as much, or you didn't notice this incident, which I'd be surprised about, but it's possible. There's some listeners who may not have been keyed into this. There was the decision between Spurs and Liverpool. It's 0-0. Luis Diaz scores. The referee or the linesman calls it offside after the play. Then play restarts with the goal disallowed, and then chaos ensued. The audio was then released after everyone basically said, "Release the audio," as if it was like just
Some sort of Liverpudlian war cry.
Exactly. It's like, you'll never walk alone and release the audio. Those are the two major things. So the most interesting thing was when that audio got released, and just talk about because not really just how you felt about that, but sort of the range of thoughts and emotions you've gone through since that moment, because things really did just gather momentum from the moment that happened all the way until now.
I mean, things have moved very quickly since Saturday, which they should, because what we saw on Saturday in something that I've said on my podcast regularly, in the best football league in the world, let's not forget, the most watched, the most revenue creating league, the officiating was unbelievable. This offside decision, you could call this in a Sunday league game, but we have billions of pounds of technology, and this is the result we get. It's a very obvious mistake. It's a very obvious error from the officials, and I don't usually stand up for Liverpool. I don't think I've ever stood up for Liverpool, but the fact that they've been conned out of this, I was glad to see some justice served. And we saw the audio, which we were discussing a little bit before we came on air. It's just I'll have to edit myself and bleep myself. It's a cluster of communication between seven people, and you kind of get an insight into why they get the decisions wrong.
Too many MCs, not enough mics, says the Fugees said
Right?
once upon a
Yeah.
time. Yeah. I it one thing that was interesting, because the following day Chelsea played against Fulham, right, at Craven Cottage. And did you watch that game?
I did, yes.
Okay, so obviously we have different commentary teams that we listen to, being in the US and the UK, but one thing that, and I believe it was Lee Dixon who was on the call as the co-coms. I don't remember who the commentator was, but they were explaining how different the conversation that the officials were having in the VAR booth with the official on the field from the day before. Like, they were being ultra careful and very, very, very they were being really, really clear about everything they were saying. Whereas when you listen to that audio, which, please, anyone who has not heard it, listen to it. It is fascinating. But when you listen to the audio, you just hear tons and tons of shorthand, right? And I understand they're trying to do this quickly, so they have ways of saying, like, you heard them saying kick point on 2D. And so the kick point is when the ball is released from the player's foot. 2D, as you can see on the screen when they show it, they have sections of the pitch, horizontal sections of the pitch, and 2D was one of those. And so they're like, put the line on 2D, and everything is so quickly said that if you aren't really paying attention, it sounds like a different language, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it actually almost does anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what we said before is that it was an insight into how this system actually works, because we see it from a supporter's point of view. We see it on TV, we see it in the stadiums of VAR review in progress for offside. And it's okay, we sit there and we look at if you're watching it on TV, you see the lines being drawn, and you see them trying to work out where the point of contact is, which part is offside, which part isn't, depending on what part of the body you can score with. But to get this insider sort of fly on the wall look at VAR was truly insightful, and it does show that, in my opinion, this system just isn't up to scratch. It's not something that has been finely tuned enough, because this was the 14th time the PGMOLs had to come out and apologize for a VR decision. 14 separate mistakes that would have cost teams points, have cost teams going into Europe, not going into Europe. It's shocking that how much miscommunication is going on, how many things that the one referee, and I will give him a bit of credit, is trying to deal with at once. You know, you said it there. It's not clear. They're trying to use all jargon language, but when you're trying to listen to this while the game is continuing, and you've kicked off again, or you've kicked off from a free kick, and you're carrying on. You've got the assistants talking to you as well. It's not a clear and obvious system to be using to make these clear and obvious calls.
Yeah, and one thing that I mentioned again right before we went on air was the fact that if you have like these sort of hosts of a review show or something, people who are broadcast hosts, they're very well trained at being able to in their ear hear the producer, someone else, keep the conversation going. They're trained in this. And then you see the picture of Simon Hooper going like this, and he's got like 5 guys all talking at the same time.
Yeah.
Being like, oh shit, we've messed up. Oh no, are you happy with this decision? And he's sitting there like, am I about to get run over by a bus here? Like, I am the one that everyone sees on the field, and
exactly. Yeah.
He is, referees are trained in refereeing. They're not trained in like being able to sort out 4 different voices in their head while also doing an extremely high pressure job that you have to be completely keyed in for. I mean, look, on the weekends, I ref like sort of small sided games for kids, like 8, 9 years old. Calling fouls is not easy. It's not. And you think it is. You're like, but 2 kids run into each other. It's a little scruffy and they both go down, and one clearly, one had the ball, and you're like, was that fair play or was that a foul? And you really, you even with 8-year-olds, you sort of have this thing. So I can only imagine at that level with that kind of pressure, what it feels like. But then to also have what is essentially chaos between 4 other people in your brain at the same time, that is definitely something that they have to fix. And I think the audio was really, really good to hear just how far they've gone away from being clear with each other, where it's just, what do we do to figure out what the decision is? And then there's this other question, which I have yet to figure out. When there's 8 matches going on at once, are there 8 VAR crews at Stockley Park? Because what it sounded like is that they didn't know that the on-field decision was offside, right? That's what you can tell. They didn't know. They thought goal was awarded, and that's why they said, good, check complete, goal, that's fine. And then the guy's like, wait, are you happy with this? On-field decision was offside. And they're like, wait, what? So they clearly aren't watching the match live and doing it. I just don't. That's another thing I don't understand.
This is it. This is another reason why this technology and this advancement in our officiating has been introduced into the game, but we have no idea how it works. We don't know if there's one team looking at 8 games, because I suspect that's probably the case. You don't want to hire 8 referees who get paid pretty well on top of having 8 systems in 8 different rooms. It's very expensive. We don't know. We're so in the dark about all of this. And as a fan of Chelsea, who has a season ticket, who's been going to matches since the early 90s, I've paid lots of money to watch football and watch the Premier League. And I subscribe to the several different channels we have here in the UK to watch all the football. But I don't know how my game is being officiated. It's ridiculous.
Well, and this is actually, because I'm in the United States and obviously going to Stamford Bridge for me and anyone who lives here or going to Premier League games is obviously not as feasible. Now, tell me about the fan experience being in the grounds, because we all know, we've heard this a million times, that fans in the grounds have no idea what's going on. All they see is VAR check, and they'll be like checking goal or checking offside or whatever. And if you're in the stands, you have really no idea what's going on. If you're watching on television, the commentary crew can hear what's going on in the VAR booth and they relay it to you right away. If
Mhm.
you're in the stands, you're just like, what's going on? So
Yeah.
tell me about that, and also tag on to it, because one of the things a lot of people say is that you don't want to celebrate as a fan because you know that there's like a chance that it will be called off. And look, I have that same thing. Sometimes I'm watching a match, a ball goes in, and I'm like, wait for a second.
Hmm.
I've even done this at our like local high school games where a ball goes in and I'm like, wait a second. Oh, I'm like, there's no, it's in, it's a goal. Like this is not going to get called back. So it filters into everywhere. So tell me, from your perspective as someone who goes to Stamford Bridge, frequently, what is the experience of VAR sort of looming way out in Stockley Park, far from the ground? How do
Yeah,
people feel about that?
it's changed the football experience. The live football experience is definitely a lot different to what it was 6, 7 years ago. I've like I said, I've been going to see Chelsea. I think my first game was the 96-97 season,
Wow.
playing the original Wimbledon, not AFC
Yeah,
Wimbledon.
yeah.
Little kid, loved it, great fun. In fact, the game was actually sponsored by like a chocolate bar called Yorkie over here in the UK, and I walked away with about 70 chocolate bars. Amazing. But the atmosphere inside Premier League stadium now is a bit more muted when a goal goes in. You do have the celebration, but you do notice, myself as well, and all the people I sit with, we take a little celebration when a goal goes in, but then we all stop. And it's like we can't let out everything we want to, be it a last minute winner, an opening goal against a rival. We have to have that wait. And everyone does sort of wait and kick around and see what happens. When it comes to VAR decisions just during open play, it's we're left in the dark. We see the referee sort of obviously he blows the whistle, stops the game, but what's going on? So, oh, sorry, we're checking. The big screen we've got VAR review, possible offside, or handball decision, red cards, whatever. And that's all we see. We see one purple board that says VAR review for red cards. And we're like, okay, yeah, obviously, if it's against Chelsea, we're saying that's ridiculous, no way, blah, blah. But it takes you out of the experience. And the whole stadium is sat there for 30 seconds. The whistles start, the booing starts because we're not shown the offense. We're not shown, it's a lot harder to keep up with the game for some fans who, can't, who are maybe further away or maybe turn their head to grab a drink or talk to their friends. And then the game's all of a sudden stopped. But there's no information. And there hasn't been. I don't think there ever will be because we saw the controversy in the 2010 World Cup with the Frank Lampard goal against Germany.
Yep.
When they showed it on the big screens when they weren't meant to. We will never see it to protect the referees. It's probably for the best if I'm being honest, but it's not good. It ruins the experience of going to watch live football.
But that's a really interesting point because I remember going to Stamford Bridge maybe 15, 18 years ago. And we went on this, I went with my team and we went on this little tour of the stands. And the guy was saying, look, at most Premier League grounds, there aren't big screens because if they show something, it might cause chaos in the stands and might create fights and stuff. And I thought that was fascinating because I was like, I get it, but that also feels like a relic from the early 90s, 80s when people literally went to grounds. There were a lot of people that went to grounds just to fight and things were also and so the question really then becomes, don't people are all asking for transparency. People want to know what's going on. If you show, say, the lines being drawn on the big screen in the stand or in the stadium, is that actually a bad thing? Is showing the incident again necessarily a bad thing? Now, it could maybe, like, if you take Malo Gusto's red card last week, right? On initial, when the challenge happened, I didn't think much of it. Similar to Curtis Jones, and then you look at it again, you're like, ooh, okay. Yeah. Now, if you show that in the stands, there are going to be those exact same reactions of ooh, but it's going to be 30,000 people doing it. And now the officials go, shit, like we've got 30,000 people but at the same time, like we've got to pick one at some point, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that at this point, people are so frustrated that maybe the transparency and letting people just deal with it, in terms of, okay, you know what's happening. This tackle happened. I think most Chelsea fans, if they were seeing that Malo Gusto challenge happening 30 seconds after it happened, most would probably be like, "Ooh, yeah, he's probably
Exactly.
gone." Right?
I come back to the point that it's one of the only sports in the world where we don't have that transparency. Everything from NFL to cricket to tennis to very high-paced sports, very slower sports, we hear officiating. When they're looking at if like a wicket is taken in cricket, we hear them going through the process and we see it as they're talking about it on screen. In NFL, all of your referees are mic'd up. You don't always agree with it, but you get the understanding, and as you start to see what they're doing and why they're doing it, even if it is just drawing the line so we can see it on the big screen, it allows us to feel that although we don't agree with it, we can see what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's not going to be riots if someone's caught offside. British football isn't like that anymore. And like I say, a relic of the past, I think so. The standard of safety and policing in UK stadiums is top notch. I've never seen any trouble except on the odd European game, but nothing ever horrible. It's not going to cause riots. It's not going to cause World War III. Just show us what's happening. That's all. I'm not asking for much. I'm really not. I'm asking to see, why did you make that decision? And maybe I might agree with you. And then I'll say, actually, do you want, ref? I don't agree with you, but good job. Because you made the right call. I don't agree with it, but you made the right call.
Yeah. And it is fascinating because I remember, in 1998 World Cup, we saw the
United States out here, bloody hell.
I know, right? I saw the United States play against Iran, and Iran scored their second goal. And I remember everyone around me was like, that was offside. And then when you look back at it, it's like not at all. Like not at all. It's absolutely the correct decision. But people didn't know. And so people went home. People left being so aggrieved and angry. And then how does that spill maybe into the streets and things like that? You could also say the counter. If there's a horrible decision, everyone sees it and knows, they might also be just as angry. I don't think there's a simple solution to this, aside from just, as we said, they need to just clean up the way they communicate. And it does help us to know. I think it really would help us to know how it works. There's something about this that's very British as well, that's very cagey in terms of letting everyone know what's really going on, because you want to protect certain people and you want to make sure that, people who have no idea what's going on don't come out and try and ruin, or take control of it. The refs definitely cloister their own,
they
job.
They have their bubble. It's the referees union. That's what we call it here. They're all looking after each other, and you understand why they do. You've said it. It's a very hard job. I wouldn't like to do it. You could pay me lots of money. I wouldn't want to do it. But if we understand what you're going through and how you're doing it, we won't give you as much of a hard time about it. If we're left in the dark, we'll act as people are now. If we take it back to the actual initial incident we were talking about, what are your feelings on what some people have been saying about, just going back in that game? So they showed, how the incident happened. The offside was wrongly called and play continued. And in the whole time where the audio was happening, in the actual game, I think about 6 passes were made. There was nothing at all that happened. What is your feeling on, in that instance, stopping the game, looking at it and say, right, sorry, VAR's made a mistake. We need to go back and we need to sort this out. Is that something that is a dangerous precedent to start reviewing reviews, or is that sort of common sense coming in?
I think it's more of common sense coming in because the incident itself was unique. It's so rare that we see that kind of cock up happening, really, right? Like, I mean, we've seen many decisions that we maybe don't agree with, or something that if they had 5 more minutes, maybe they would have seen it a different way. Then it's different when they've actually completely missed something. And, Jurgen Klopp asking for the match to be replayed because he's never seen this happen before, when 2 years ago, Liverpool benefited from a Wolves goal that was chalked off that was good, right? So, and that was a late winner. It wasn't just like the opening goal in the opening half. So There's two sides to this. One, because you do, it's interesting when you match up the audio with the play, like you said, there's like maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds of play
of nothing. Yeah.
And nothing happened, right? At least nothing happened. Now, if a goal had been scored, now we've got a whole big other problem,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So that's why you can't necessarily make a blanket statement that, well, if there's a mistake, we can go back and review it, because you should not, right? You cannot start going back in time as like just a matter of course. Now, because this was so unique, once that ball went out of play, I would have had no problem personally with them saying, look, going to the coaches and saying, look, there's been a massive error. But then think about fans in the stadium, right? All of a sudden we've awarded a goal. I mean, you want to talk about confusion and chaos. Everyone in that Tottenham Hotspur stadium would have been mind blown. Liverpool fans would have been like, wait, what? They counted the goal? And then all the Spurs fans would have been like, how on earth is this possible? Now, look, Ange Postecoglou, love the guy. I think he's very measured. He seems very, very, very sane in the way he deals with a lot of things. But if you're a Spurs fan, the rule is that once play restarts, that's it. So now, are you okay with the rules having been sort of broken for the integrity of the game? It just creates more debate. Well, in this scenario, I wouldn't have minded it, but I do see where a lot of people would have disagreed, right?
Absolutely. But I was talking to a colleague at work yesterday. We've had this before, because do you remember during the COVID era of football where Man United were awarded a penalty after the full-time whistle? We've had this again. Every instant is slightly separate.
It's Brighton, right?
We've had this. I think it was Brighton or
Fulham. I think it was Brighton. It was Brighton, yeah.
Right, okay, no, my mistake.
Yeah, Neil Mope. Neil Mope handball. Yeah, that's what it was.
And that is the fact that you finished the game and we're going to go back and review something. We've had these instances before, and it's easier for them then. There's no fans. Cool. You just got 22 angry players to deal with. And I think, was Ronaldo there? No, Ronaldo wasn't there at that time.
No, not
yet. That would have made it easier. But again, the transparency, if they had stopped the game 20 seconds later, made an announcement on the PA in the stadium, like you say, spoken to the coaches and showed everyone and said, right, this is what happened. There was an error. Klopp, Postecoglou, 70,000 fans in Tottenham Stadium. Look what happened. You may not disagree with it. It's a goal. Sorry, okay, so it just is.
How about the other alternative that's been spoken about, which I'll be honest, right off the bat, this just pisses me off. The idea of, well, we're going to go to Spurs and say, hey, just let Liverpool score. That one for me, like, it was like, what was it? Leeds against Villa when they were both in the championship.
The old Bielsa.
Yeah. And Bielsa allowed Villa to go and score on them because they wanted to match up. And that I completely disagreed with at the time. I thought Bielsa was being way too nice. And in this scenario, the idea of saying, well, look, this has happened. Spurs, why don't you let Liverpool just go down and score a goal? That I'm not okay with. I don't agree with this, like, oh, let's just mediate the situation to make everyone feel better. It's like, it's either you make a decision as referees, you don't just start leaving it up to the others to officiate and decide what happens in the game. I don't think that's a good thing.
As much as Jurgen Klopp wants to,
Gosh, I mean, the whole replaying the match. We want to talk about another one that's probably more egregious than that Man United Brighton one, because that pissed me off too. I was like, look, I was happy to see Man United not win that match, and then all of a sudden, after the final whistle, so that was sort of my way of looking at it. But then there was I believe it was Villa against Sheffield United, right at the very beginning of the restart after COVID. There was a ball that went into the top corner and was sort of fished out by the goalkeeper, and goal line technology failed. And they admitted it. They were like, goal line technology did not work. And this was with 11 games to go in the season. Both teams were fighting relegation. I don't remember. Did Sheffield United get relegated that season?
I believe they did.
So
I think this is the first time they've been up since that season. Yeah.
So, that was another incident of something that is supposed to be, black and white, factual technology failed. There was no replay of the match. There was no let's allow them to score. There was none of that. And so there's also a point to this where I'm just like, look, it's a game and a spectacle. So I know there's a lot of money involved in it. I know that there's important things in it, but one incident is not going to decide whether or not you win or lose. Like, there are millions of other minutes. There's so many other situations. You shouldn't have conceded this goal. You shouldn't have, there's a million things that can happen where you can't just go back and say, well, that incident is why we got relegated with 10 games to go. It's like, well, did you not pick up points against other teams on the way? So that's why it's like, at a certain point, everyone has to just be like, there is a margin of error. It's okay. Like, that's just the way it is. There has to be, from fans, players, coaches, everyone, a sort of just a little bit of a margin where you say, sometimes these things may happen. And obviously, if something egregious happens, how do you fix it? And, like we said, that when you watched Fulham Chelsea, and actually they said the same thing about the Burnley Luton game, that you could hear them being very careful, very descriptive, not talking over each other, and doing the best they could to make sure they got it right. I think that they just got so comfortable in all their, the way that they shrink their language, the way they say things quickly, people talking over each other. I think they got so comfortable with their ability to get decisions right, because you could hear the guy go, "Yep, check complete, it's fine, go." And then they're like, whoa. So it's about slowing down, remembering that you do have to take extreme care with every single situation.
Absolutely.
You don't just blow through a review and go, yeah, we do this every day, every game. We know how to do it. It's clear. Because when you make a mistake like this, it then brings the whole entire thing into, question, disrepute, whatever you want to call it. It's just fascinating. Look, VAR is here to stay. There's no question. They're not going to bin it. There are precedents for moments where the officials have done what they need to do to get a decision right. We also have seen many, many, many decisions where you think it's one way, and then, oh, wow, actually, that was a goal, or actually, that wasn't a goal. But then with VAR, I think the most difficult part is, at what point do they need to insert themselves in really minute things? And for them, it's kind of in my opinion, it's damned if they do, damned if they don't, because we all can go and, we can basically sleuth every single angle that we have available to us and point out a mistake. And this does happen every now and again, where people are like, well, look, this happened. And so then they're embarrassed because they should have done their job. So now they're going to be extra careful. Now they're looking at letter of the law for everything. And, in the Champions League this week, there were 3 controversial handballs, all of which the initial decision by the referee I actually agreed with, but it was the VAR review that went by the official letter of the law, and then either chalked off a goal, awarded a penalty, did not award a penalty, whatever the situation was. And I think it's just a very, very, very difficult thing for the officials, because the expectations of fans is that every decision is as close to right as possible. But then you find out there's 2 sides. Some people are going to believe one. And so, I'm sure when you watch review shows on Sky or whatever, I see them all the time here. You've got 3-4 ex-pros on a panel, and half of them think handball and the other half don't. So, like, we've been following this sport, at this highest level for 30 years. And like you said, we don't know what a handball really is or is not. And a lot of it just comes down to the situation, the feeling, what the ref sees, the little bit of nuance that the game just has in abundance. And can everyone just kind of get over it if a decision doesn't necessarily go their way because the other team feel it has gone their way? Gary Lineker says no, and Roy Keane says yes, and then you got Jamie Carragher saying you'll never walk alone, and
Micah Rich is just screaming in the corner.
Why? Look at my haircut, mate.
Looking good, Big Meeks. Yes, all right. Micah, here, look, go have some more food. Off you go, Colin. Be quiet. Yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's a poor decision, a poor situation. If we can learn from it, fantastic. If we see the transparency that we're looking for, fantastic. If it helps shape the system to actually start working in, great. Will I ever still want VAR in football? No. I enjoy the unprecedented nature of football. And, if it goes your way, if it doesn't go your way, it's football. You love it, you hate it, you cry, you laugh. It's part of the beautiful game. But VAR, know its place. Try not to make it too perfect. Try not to get every single decision right, because you never will. And it will end up ruining the game. Simple as.
So I've had one idea before we move on to Chelsea, because that's really we're sort of on the bread side of this podcast. We'll spend most of it on Chelsea, but two things. One, I think that referees should actually be the head honcho in this situation. Mm-hmm. In the sense that if I'm a referee, I know that the way referees have to be decisive, right? Like that's the way that they're trained and everything. But when there's VAR, use it as a tool to help you. I don't think that VAR should be the omnipresent, like, god of the situation. I think it should be the referee, where they say, there's been a tackle in the box, and the referee tells the guys, I'm awarding a penalty. Okay, but I am not really sure about this. What does my assistant say? The assistant says, well, I think you may have gotten this wrong. From my angle, you may have gotten this wrong. So then he says, hey, VAR, load me up a quick review of this. I'm going to go and make my decision. And so what they do is they facilitate. Here's a few angles. Here's real speed. Because that's another thing about the Curtis Jones one. Everyone was like, well, in real time, it's a yellow card. In slow motion, it's a 4-game suspension. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you expect the referees to do about that, right? I think that because they are on the field and they can sense things. They can sense when a player is, being cynical. If you can tell when a player is a little bit on edge, where they're getting reckless just in the way that they're behaving. You can see it coming. That's probably a player you should book. That's probably a player who's about to foul somebody. But a guy who's just going about his business gets to a tackle a quarter of a second late and steps on someone's foot. Does he need to be yellow carded for that? And as a referee, you can tell. And that's where the whole intent and, he's tried to do him and all that thing that they say. The referees are the ones who, they are around the players. They're talking to the players. They're the ones that really feel the situation. I think they should be in total control of the final decision. And it shouldn't be VAR saying, we recommend you go to the screen and reverse your decision. And here are the rules, bullet point in, section A, B of the code. It says that this kind of tackle at this point in the heel is classified as a red card. So you have to give a red card. The referees have their hands tied completely here. They basically, similar to the assistant referees who have flags, you're starting to wonder, what the hell are those even for? If semi-automated VAR can essentially put their role as deciding offside, not a thing, then, it's as if VAR actually referees the game and not the referee. And I think if the referee was more in charge and just said, look, I want to see it again just so that I can be clear in what I have decided. And if I want to change my mind, I can change my mind. And you will see fewer of the situations where the moment he goes to the monitor, you already know what's going to happen. Right.
It's in the name. Deciding. VAR is virtual assistant referee.
Yep.
The linesman isn't going to be making, he isn't going to be calling penalties, and that's going to happen. You're an assistant referee, assist the referee. Mm-hmm. Simple as. But yeah, like I say, it's taken on this God almighty sort of formula and needs to be knocked down a few pegs. And hopefully this decision will. Hopefully it will put it back in its place where it should be.
And, it's another situation where AI puts people out of jobs. I don't know if you watched the U.S. Open, but my goodness. So the U.S. Open in tennis, I have to make that clear because there's also one in golf. But the U.S. Open in tennis was, just a few weeks after Wimbledon. At Wimbledon, you see line judges bloody everywhere, just surrounding the court. The U.S. Open, it was naked. There was like 2 ball kids on each side, and that was it. because everything was done with AI, and challenges were essentially useless. It didn't make sense to challenge because the AI is right and it called it immediately. So you saw no challenges at the US Open, none, because there's no point. It's already done by the machines and the calls are all correct, which I thought was fascinating to see, right? So they can do this. And I know with tennis, it's different because of the lines and everything, but also, like we said, the Premier League has so much money. They need to be able to do this. Now, the second point I was going to bring up was it 14? I don't remember how many of the 20 clubs voted down the use of the semi-automated offside technology that we've seen in the Champions League, that we saw in the World Cup. Apparently it got voted down by the Premier League. Maybe Luton voted it down because they don't have the infrastructure. Fine. But how many teams actually said, nah, we're good on that, which is completely mindless, in my opinion. And so that is a big question is who was on board with not bringing in technology that we've seen work in the World Cup, in the Champions League. And so why would we not use it in the Premier League? I thought that's a weird one that we still need to get to the bottom of. Again, it's these situations that are shrouded in mystery and secrecy.
Again, it comes down to transparency. Yep, it'd be lovely to know who voted for it, who didn't vote for it, and why, because we've seen it implemented, and it was one of the recent innovations to football that I was really for. It worked really well. We didn't have any controversy, and like you say, with the US Open, there's no challenging it. It's there. It's done. You can't manipulate it. It's not because of someone's put the line in the wrong place, or someone said all clear, or decision okay, or whatever terminology they were using in the VAR office. It's something that can't be argued with if the rules are clear. And you can program this to make the rules clear. It's done. I'd like to know why, but we never will, because they don't want us commoners and us fans getting involved in all these things and shouting our voices. We did it in the Super League and that was bad enough. But to do it to other leagues, can't have that. No, God, can't have the people paying the money to see these teams get involved, can we? I'm really cynical today, actually.
That's okay. That's what VAR does to people. It just makes us, it gets us on edge. But I mean, look, if we all, as Chelsea fans, we know if goal line technology had been around in 2005,
yeah.
The ghost goal, as Mourinho calls it.
No night in Istanbul, would there?
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, it's where you go back and you think throughout history, this has always happened. Why all of a sudden do we need to be seeking perfection when it's never existed? And we all got on with it for decades and decades. So, yeah, VAR. We'll see if it improves. Again, I love the transparency of the video. If any of you have not heard the audio, go listen to it. It sounds like, I said Apollo 13 because that, we'll keep it at that. Also sounds like a plane crashing, quite frankly. It's just insane.